Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good day to Dr. Razi. Okay, my name is Ahmad bin Mazelan, and I will be the first presenter for our presentation. Okay, the topics that we're going to cover for today is about the development of education in Malaysia and the relationship with the national education policy. Okay, alright. This is my team members. Okay, the first picture is obviously me, the most handsome one in this group. Okay, and then the second one is AMILA Syahira. She will be the second presenter, and the third presenter will be ALIA AMALINA. Okay, so basically what we are going to cover for this presentation. Okay, this presentation we will cover the two main topics. Okay, the first one we will focus more on the education of the education development. Okay, and the second main topic is about 11 PPIP shifts. Okay, but for education development we divided into two. Okay, I will present about penyata RAZAK and laporan rahmat talib, while AMILA will present about keordinan pelajaran, akta pelajaran dan laporan kabinet. And the third presenter will present about 11 PPIP shifts. Okay, so basically, before we go further into this topic, I will give a brief view about what our education system is before the independence. Okay, before the independence, before the arrival of colonization, Malaya, we have our own education, but it's not stated in any. We don't have any reports, or we don't have any policy at that time. Okay, at that time it's focused more on the social structure in the society. Okay, for example, the higher status people will get the formal education. Okay, for example, like Sultan, the King, the Temenggung, the Bendahara, and so on and so forth. Okay, but for the normal people, okay, they still get the education, but it is not as formal as the one in higher status. Okay, because the normal people will get the normal education, the informal education that is suited for their survival skill. Okay. So for the education system before the independence, the time frame is between 1400 until 1956. Okay, and I divide the time frame into three. Okay, the first one is before British colonization. Okay, before the British colonization, before the arrival of British, okay, we have our own education. Like I said earlier, we have our own education. But before British come in Malaya, okay, Islam come first. Okay, that is why we have Islamic education. Okay, and the Islamic education widely, or the Islamic influence heavily influenced the education at that time in Tanah Melayu. Okay, and the places or the educational institution at that time is not, we don't have any proper, what we call it, education institution. Okay, for example, people can learn the Islamic education in teacher's house, okay, mosque, surau, madrasah, and pondok. Okay, and most of the students who graduated from madrasah or pondok, most of them tend to further their study in another country, for example, India and Egypt. Okay, that is for the first time frame. The second time frame is before World War II. Okay, before World War II, we have our own primary secondary education, we have national training, teacher training, we have vocational and technical education, and we have higher education. But we don't have our own identity in the education system at that time. Okay, we cannot say that is our identity, that is our education identity during the second time frame. Okay, and the third time frame is during British colonization. Okay, during British colonization, with the arrival of another races, for example, Chinese and Indian. Okay, Chinese and India. Okay, it's create more complex system. Okay, so that is why we have two reports. Okay, the first one is bounce report, and the second one is Penwu report. Okay, bounce report, bear in mind, is favored by the Malay, and Penwu report is favored heavily by Chinese and Indian. Okay, so the third report is RAZAK report. Okay, RAZAK report I will explain more after this. Okay, all right, that is the brief explanation. Okay, this is the quote that I get from Ken Robinson. He said that you cannot predict the outcome of human development. All you can do is like a farmer create the condition under which it will begin to flourish. Okay, for example, we take an analogy as a farmer. Okay, he used an analogy as a farmer. Okay, educator as a farmer. Okay, for example, as you know, a farmer, for example, the one who want to grow musangking. Okay, so he need to have a proper condition or a proper ways in order for him to have the musangking at the end of the production. Okay, let's say he want to use to produce durian musangking, but along the way he planted the seed for rambutan. Okay, so it's very contradict with the aim and the ways. Okay, so he used a farmer here to show that we as an educator, as a teacher, as the one who want to produce the better generation in their education, in their ethics, in their moral. Okay, so we need to have a specific or better plan for them to follow and then to flourish. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, the education development. Okay, the first one is RAZAK report. Okay, RAZAK report is RAZAK reports is being introduced because the leader at that time want to shape the federation of the education federation for Malaya, eventually Malaysia. Okay, so this is the sixth aspect. The sixth aspect that for me is very important. The first one is syllabus. Okay, this syllabus, the RAZAK report proposed for all the school use the same syllabus. Okay, this is for them to unite the students from different races, because as I said earlier, we have Malay, we have Chinese, we have Indian. Okay, so that is why he want to make the syllabus for all school. Okay, unite the student from different races under one educational system. Okay, and then it is no more usage. Okay, no more usage of the Chinese textbook or the Indian textbook. Okay, so all the students in the school will use the textbook from our government. Okay, the second aspect is about the Malay language. Okay, Malay language I put here is as a medium of communication. Okay, it is used as medium of communication to replace English language and eventually become the national language. Okay, bear in mind, before in the British colonization, okay, Malay language is not a medium of communication. We have English language as a medium of communication. Okay, so they changed that, okay, from English to Malay. So it is very important. Okay, so the third aspect is about the Malay and English subject, and it is compulsory for primary and secondary school. Okay, and this will be this is implemented stage by stage. Okay, it cannot be forced. It cannot be forced at once. Okay, so the okay, it from stage to stage. Okay, the fourth aspect is about status of school. Okay, status of school change to sekolah kebahasaan and Malay as a main medium of communication. Okay, this is, however, the school, for example, SJK, still the Chinese school or the Indian school or the English school are still allowed to use their language, their own language, as a medium of communication at that time. Okay, at that time. All right, and this the SJK and SJKC is introduced in order to unite all the races under one type of school. Okay, SJK and SK. All right, and the fifth one is about teachers' qualification. Okay, the teachers' qualification is very important because in order for us to be a teacher, we need to have a qualification. We need to have a proper qualification in order to teach others. Okay, so that we can produce a better human being. Okay, and the sixth one is about level of education. Okay, bear in mind at that time. Okay, at that time, for the secondary school, we have three stage or three levels. The first one is sekolah menengah rendah. The second one is sekolah menengah atas and pra-university. Okay, so at that time we don't. For today, we have secondary school. We have upper secondary or lower secondary. Okay, but at that time, we have our own level education for secondary. Okay, this is because to standardize and divide the level of institution. Okay, all right. So, what is the relationship of National Education Policy and RAZAK report? Okay, in general, National Education Policy is derived from RAZAK report. Okay, but from time to time, okay, as the time goes on, people revise, amend, okay, what else? Change the content until there is no more elements of RAZAK report in educational policy. But it can be said that RAZAK report is like a mother for national education policy, even though there is no element of RAZAK report in today's national education policy. Okay, so we move on. Okay, so Rahman Talib. What is the purpose of Rahman Talib? Rahman Talib is being introduced to revise the policy in RAZAK report. Okay, in order this revision, okay, these changes or this amendment is being introduced because to strengthen our education system in our country. Okay, and the first, and this is the fourth aspect for me is the most important one. The first more aspect is about a Malay language status. Okay, the Malay language status is used in all of the aspects. Okay, for example, starting point, it is the starting point. Okay, it is the starting point to implement Malay language as the main language in communication. Okay, it's implemented in every of school. Okay, in every of school, such as SK, SMK, secondary, primary, secondary, or tertiary education. Okay, and all public exam at that time use Malay as language. Okay, language of as a medium. Okay, and the second aspect. Okay, the second aspect is about assessment. Okay, or exam. Okay, the exam at that time is standardized for every level. Okay, and like I said earlier, public exam in also being conducted in Malay. And for the students who want to enter secondary school, they need to pass or they must pass. It is compulsory for them to pass in Malay subject before they go to secondary school. Okay, the third aspect that is very important in this report is about Tibet. Okay, Tibet being introduced here. Okay, Tibet is being introduced here because they want. Okay, we want to produce. Okay, we want to produce the student who have appropriate skill. Okay, so they want to train the students that have low academic performance. Okay, so as we all know, not all students have very good academic performance, but it does not mean that the student fail in their life. Okay, for example, the one who get no A's or straight G's in their SPM, okay, or in their what we call it, PBD, okay, they still have another skills that they can promote, okay, that they can use in their life. Okay, so that is the function of Tibet. Okay, and the fourth one is about the moral and religious subject. Okay, the moral is for non-Muslim, and for Muslim, they need, okay, they must have religious subject. This is being introduced because they want to strengthen the moral or the values, or they want to implant the good values in the students. Okay, that is for the aspect. Okay, so what is the changes? What is the changes between the RAZAK report and Rahman Talib? Okay, the amendment and changes occur in these two reports. Okay, like I said earlier, Rahman Talib is used to revise the RAZAK report. Okay, so what changes that happen? Okay, the first one is about the primary education. The primary education. Okay, the primary education at that time becomes free. Okay, becomes free for the students to access. Okay, so all the students have their rights to get the education from their childhood. Okay, and in here, Rahman Talib also introduced the SK and SJK. Okay, so the Chinese and the Indian will have SJK and SK for public school. But the students in, for example, the Chinese or the Indians who want to enter SK, they can, and vice versa. Malay can enter SJK. Okay, and the third one is about automatic interim of years. Okay, even though they don't have good academic performance, they still move forward. For example, from year 1, next year, year 2. Okay, even though year 1, the academic performance is very poor. Okay, and the fourth one is about the morals education. Okay, like I said earlier, the fourth factor is about the morals. Okay, the morals education is being focused on. Okay, and before, if you still remember, in RAZAK report, they do not focus more on morals, but in Rahman Talib, the morals education is being focused on in order to produce a better human being. Okay, the better generations. Okay, and all in all, Rahman Talib report then changed to the Education Act. Okay, so for the Education Act or Akta Pelajaran 1961 will be presented by AMILA. Okay, so I think that's all from my part. Okay, Assalamualaikum. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Amila Syahira binti Abdul Razak, and I will continue the group presentation with Education Act 1961. So, Education Act 1961 somehow is connected to National Language Act 1967, where this act put a massive emphasis on Malay language as a national language, and so did the Education Act 1961. Education Act 1961 was actually a continuation of Rahman Talib's report of 1960, which had been presented in the Parliament and then legislated into the Education Act 1961. So the proposals of Rahman Talib's report were included in Education Act of 1961. Thus, the contents and points of Education Act 1961 is similar as the Rahman Talib's report 1960. So now let's proceed to the contents of Education Act 1961. Okay. So before we go further into the contents of Education Act 1961, let's talk about the summary of the Education Act 1961. So the federal education policy aims to establish a national system that will foster the development of culture, economy, and politics of the country, in addition to making the Malay language as the national language. So, among the contents of Education Act 1961 are, firstly, Bahasa Melayu is upheld as the primary language of instruction, transmission, or medium of communication. So what was the reason behind this implementation? Why not other languages when Malaysia is a country of a multiracial society? Okay. So we will be able to understand the reason, the cause of this decision further when I will elaborate more about this particular section later on in the next slide after this. As of now, let's get back to the content of the Education Act 1961. So among the most evident impact of this Education Act is primary school then became Sekolah Kebangsaan (SK) or National School, and Sekolah Jenis Kebangsaan (SJK) or National Type School. It is the continuation of the suggestion in the Barnes report where only Sekolah Kebangsaan National School should exist with the hope of forming unity among the people. So with the existence of Sekolah Kebangsaan or National School, the same school examination system was decided. Curriculum and examination should be coordinated in both national and national type schools. Malay as national language is taught in all primary schools altogether, replacing English as the medium of instruction. So, like for the questions or instructions, for the examinations or the lessons were done in Malay language or Bahasa Melayu. In addition, Education Act 1961 also stressed on the secondary and vocational education in order to meet the needs of skilled manpower for the country. Because during this era, our country lack of professionals in the essential working space. So to counter this issue, this problem, the government came up with a solution to emphasize secondary and vocational education so that the nation's skilled manpower needs could be met. And then in terms of spirituality, moral and religious were emphasized as the core of education so that the citizens' spiritual needs were also fulfilled. However, this can only be performed should there be at least 15 people or parents request to have this moral and religious education. And then the teachers in charge of teaching should be professionally trained. And then the duration about the lesson of moral and religious education should be at least 2 times. Ataupun in Malay, we call it 2 masa in a week during school weeks or during school days. Now let's move on to the National Language Act 1967. Okay. So Malaysia is among a few countries who has its own act for the national language. So actually, in the Constitution of Malaysia 1957, under the Article 152, it is stated that the national language shall be the Malay language and shall be in such script as Parliament may by law. Okay, so this Constitution has already guaranteed the status of Bahasa Melayu as the national language. But the existence of the National Language Act 1967 was intended to further ensure that the national language is applied, used, implemented, holistically in the life or social structures of the people and the government. Okay. So this act was created to make sure that Bahasa Melayu is used across the country by every people, every race, Malays, Indians, Chinese, other Bumi Putra ethnic, under every circumstance, be it in the formal or informal settings. This Act, this National Language Act 1967, upholding the Malay language as a national language, as written in the Constitution and to guarantee the unity of the people of Malaysia. Apart from that, this Act also establishes the use of one language of communication and understanding between one race and another without arousing or creating suspicions or misunderstandings. So a little history behind the National Language Act 1967. The Act was passed in 1967, of course. The lower house or Dewan Rakyat passed the National Language Bill with 95 votes in favor and 11 votes against. So the purpose of this bill is enacted to implement the provisions in Article 152 of the Federal Constitution, which makes the Malay language as the national language or the sole official language of the nation. Now let's take a look at the content of National Language Act 1967. Firstly, like I mentioned earlier, the establishment of Bahasa Melayu as the sole official language is part of the content for National Language Act 1967. So what was the reason behind the need to make Bahasa Melayu as the only official language? Okay, so the reason is because Malaysia is a heterogeneous nation, a country with multiracial people, various ethnics and customs. Therefore, this is a part of the government's effort to unite the people from these different backgrounds to use only one language as a medium of communication for every group of people so that unity is achieved. Okay, then next, the content is the translation of official documents or communication in other languages are used by the federal or state government under the circumstances involving a public interest. So other languages like English or even Mandarin could be used in official activities or work mainly for the purpose of a public interest. If we notice, the conclusion behind these two contents is to ensure that the use of Bahasa Melayu is standardized in all official matters. However, if there is a need to translate into or use another language for official purposes, it is still allowed with the consent of the Yang di-Pertuan Agong as stated in Phase 4 of the Federal Constitution. So what is the connection between the National Language Act 1967 with the National Education Policy? So in accordance to the National Education Policy, the National Language Act 1967 aims to produce Malaysians who have a high sense of responsibility in adopting and maintaining the status of Bahasa Melayu as a national language as declared in the National Education Policy. This emphasis of making or upholding Bahasa Melayu as the national language, the sole official language of instruction, was primarily mentioned and is a major aspect that had been stressed on in the Education Act 1961. So this is the effort of the government to instill and to encourage all races to use Bahasa Melayu. Okay. So the national language, as we all know, is the most important factor in uniting the multiracial society in Malaysia. Now we will look at the Cabinet Committee Report 1979. Before the existence of the Cabinet Committee Report 1979, in 1974, the government had set up a Cabinet Committee of 8 people, including Datuk Sri Dr. Mahathir Mohamad as the chairman of the Cabinet. What is exactly the purpose of this establishment? So the purpose of this cabinet in 1979 is to review the implementation of national education policy, goals, and impact of the education system. Here during this period, Datuk Seri Dr. MOHD as the Minister of Education was responsible and thought the need to review the national education system. He wanted to know whether the national education system is effective at that time or what are the aspects that require more attention and improvement. Okay. Secondly, this cabinet also wanted to ensure the manpower of the nation can be met, as well as establishing an education system that can meet the nation's goals toward the formation of a united, disciplined, and well-trained society. Over here, we have the outcomes from the review made by the Minister of Education during that era, that's Dr. MOHD, and the committee members of the cabinet, which led to the establishment of the Cabinet Committee Report 1979. There are 6 major aspects from the report as you can see here. First, it puts an emphasis on 3M basic education, concept of reading, membaca, writing, menulis, and counting, meniru. So in order to achieve a quality education, we need to prioritize the basics first. The solid foundation is important as it is the major ground of a good and quality education for the people. This 3M concept, reading, writing, and counting is essential and has been taught ever since kindergarten so that you will be able to proceed to the next level of education. Okay, so the second content is emphasis on strong spiritual education. Okay, so what are these spiritual education? They are actually the Islamic study and moral to educate people with religious and moral education in order to shape an excellent personality. Okay. Islamic study is for the Malay Muslim children and moral is taught to the children of other religions. But basically, both groups study mainly the same core concept, which is about self-morality. Religious and moral education should coexist with the standard curriculum in order to produce a society that owns spiritual and life balance, and also produce citizens that respect each other. So the third content of Cabinet Committee report is the emphasis on Malaysian style curriculum. The Malaysian style curriculum that reflects the nation's identity. So programs or events that expose students since the early age about the history of Malaysia, programs that ignite their love for their country. So these are the Malaysian style curriculum. So this kind of curriculum that reflects on Malaysia's identity should be organized in order to produce a society, produce people with high sense of patriotism. Okay. And the fourth content is the implementation of upper secondary education through 2 measures, which are academic and vocational. So the implementation is needed to produce highly knowledgeable and capable citizens in the field of skills. And then we have the opportunity to continue schooling from 9 years to 11 years. So during this era, the school system was prolonged from 9 years to 11 years in order to provide an opportunity to the people to pursue education over a longer period of time. And then next one, we have the next content of the Cabinet Committee report is the smoother national education management procedures in order to increase the effectiveness of national education. So what is the relationship of this content to the national education policy? So the implementation strategy to achieve the implementation strategy The national education policy is the implementation strategy to achieve the national education policy. It's actually a continuation. The national education policy is actually the continuation of the features from the 1979 cabinet report. So among the relationships are the first, the national language as the medium of instruction, as mentioned earlier. Bahasa Melayu, Malay language, is the medium of instruction in all levels of education or official purposes. The language of the country. And then the second one, we have the coherent curriculum and examination system. And the third, the last relationship is to provide primary education according to the new primary school curriculum KBSR based on 3M, namely reading, writing, and counting in 1983, which led to the integrated secondary school curriculum KBSM in 1989. So that is all from me. I will pass the presentation to the next presenter of the group. Thank you.
Hello, hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is AMALINA, and I'm going to be the third presenter for this group. The topics that I will cover, which be Education Development Master Plan. The second one will be the National Education Philosophy. The third one will be 11 Shift of Educational Transformation. And the last one, I will be explaining briefly about the relation between the 6 trusts in Education Development Master Plan with the 11 Shift of Educational Transformation. So briefly about this master plan, it was launched in January 2007. It was to promote the education agenda under the 9 Malaysian plan. They also list out 6 trusts that represents the objective of the national mission. And also this master plan is a comprehensive education planning document written based on 3 aspects, which are infrastructure, content, and human resource. Furthermore, the aim of the master plan was to provide quality education for all, which means that the Ministry of Education was to provide equal opportunities in terms of education to all students. Okay, the next one, we look at the flowchart of Education Development Master Plan. The main focus here is the PIPP Strategic Trust, which has the mission, the main mission here, which is, I mentioned just now, to provide quality education to all. And also it is based on the basic of education development, which includes access, quality, equity, unity, and also the efficiency. The next one, we move on to the 6 trusts of Education Development Master Plan. The first trust will be the nation building, which will be focusing on to strengthen the love towards a nation within the individuals of Malaysia citizens. The second one will be developing human capital, which focus on the individual's development to become a moral and also a loving Malaysians. The third trust, strengthening the national schools, which includes the curriculum in school, the teachers, principals, and also the students. The fourth trust, bridging the education gap, the focus will be on the students living in rural areas, where they look at the accommodations and the facilities provided for them. The next one is elevating the teaching profession, which will be focusing more on the teachers, on how to educate the teachers, how to make sure that these teachers adapt to our educational system. And the last one is accelerating excellence of educational institutions, to see how good our educational institution can be compared to international educational institutions. The next one is the National Education Philosophy of Falsafah Pendidikan Kebangsaan, FPK. So this excerpt is taken from the National Education Philosophy. Education in Malaysia is an ongoing effort towards further developing the potential of individuals in a holistic and integrated manner, so as to produce individuals who are intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and physically balanced and harmonious based on a firm belief in and devotion to God. Such an effort is designed to produce Malaysian citizens who are knowledgeable and competent, who possess high moral standards, and who are responsible and capable of achieving high levels of personal well-being, as well as being able to contribute to the harmony and betterment of the family, the society, and the nation at large. So the main focus of this national education philosophy is to produce individuals, the potential of individuals in a holistic and integrated manner. So these individuals who are not only intellectual or high spirit and also emotionally and physically balanced individuals, but also they must have this firm belief and devotion to God. And this Malaysian citizen must be also knowledgeable and competent with high moral standards, high moral values, and also being a responsible citizen and able to achieve high levels of personal well-being, or able to adapt with the advancement of current technology that we have nowadays to contribute to the society and also to the nation at large. In this national education philosophy, there are several branches of philosophy found. The first one is the metaphysics, which in the holistic and integrated to develop individuals' potential and abilities in holistic and integrated manner. And the second branch of philosophy is the epistemology and ongoing effort, which talks about the knowledge is ever changing. So it is actually important to be able to adapt new development, including the ICT advancement. So this actually to see how good the teachers actually deliver the lessons, and also the students, how capable the capability of the students to adapt the lessons into their real life. The third branch of philosophy is the axiology, the firm belief and devotion to God, which is mentioned in this national education philosophy, where the Malaysian citizen must believe that God as creator. And the next one is high moral standards, the importance of religious and moral teachings in curriculum in schools in Malaysia. And the last branch of philosophy that can be found is the logic, which is the competent citizen, the importance of valid and non-valid reasoning to foster the self-competence within these Malaysia citizens, which includes the academic qualification and also the professional qualification. The next slide is talking about the FPK important roles. The first one is to give direction and guidelines toward all efforts in advancing the national education system to make sure that our national education system is still on the right track, even though there are changes somewhere. The second one is to become a policy in deciding the goals of national education. This is also as a benchmark for our national education. The third one is to be a policy in deciding the curriculum content. So our curriculum content can be changing time to time. So this policy plays an important role. The last one is to give a way for schools and educational institutions in planning their teaching and learning activities. This also will guide our educational institutions to plan properly our teaching and learning activities in schools or in educational institutions. The next one is the 11th shift to transform the system. This is actually the 11th shift of educational transformation, where the ministry has sought for input from a wide range of sources, including the educationists, academics, parents, and also the students. So the ministry has identified 11 shifts that need to be adapted or need to be adapted to transform our education system towards the better. So each shift actually will address at least one of the 5 system outcomes of access, quality, equity, unity, and efficiency, which I mentioned in the basic of education development. So some of these shifts represent a change in strategy and direction. Others represent operational changes in the way the ministry and schools have historically implemented existing policies, which means that this educational transformation, they are not totally replacing the old policies, but they are making the policies much better than before. Okay, the first shift is to provide equal. The first shift is provide equal access to quality education of an international standard. So this is actually the benchmark learning of languages, science, and mathematics to international standards. They try to make the languages, the subject of science and mathematics equal to the international standards. And the second one is ensure every child is proficient in Bahasa Malaysia and English language and is encouraged to learn an additional language. So this roll out the SSR Bahasa Malaysia curriculum for national type schools with intensive remedial support for students who require it. They want to integrate the Bahasa Malaysia curriculum in schools in Malaysia. And also they upskill English language teachers to make sure that these teachers are competent enough to teach their students English. And also they want to encourage every child to learn an additional language by 2025. The third shift is develop values-driven Malaysia, where they want to enhance Islamic and moral education with greater focus on unity and fostering stronger bonds between students. They want every student, regardless their religions and also their races, to work together. The fourth shift is transform teaching into the profession of choice. They want to revamp the IPG to world-class standards by 2020, which means that they want to make sure that IPGM graduates are in the same level as the international graduates. The fifth shift, ensure high-performing school leaders in every school, which is focusing more on the authorities, the principals in school, what they need to do as a leader in every school in Malaysia. How they need to make sure that their school give the best performance. The sixth shift is empower JPMs, PPDs, and schools to customize solution based on need. So they want to accelerate school improvement through systematic district-led programs rolled out across all states by 2014. They want the JPMs, the PPDs, to come out with the best program to make sure that these schools are actually good enough for the students. And ensure all government and government-aided schools receive equitable financial support. So these schools are not only need morally support from the JPN and also PPD, but they need to be financially equipped. So the seventh shift, leverage ICT to scale up quality learning across Malaysia. They need to be provided with the internet access and virtual learning environment, and also to maximize the use of ICT for distance and self-paced learning to expand access to high-quality teaching regardless of location or student skill level. As we can see now, the schools are closed and the students are learning through PDPR. So this internet access is very important. And now this is one of 11 shifts in educational transformation to make sure that no student left behind in learning online. The next one, the 8th shift, transform ministry delivery capabilities and capacities, which means that they need to empower the JPN and also the PPD through greater decision-making power over budget and personnel from 2013 and greater accountability for improving student outcomes. So as in the level of ministry, they need to make sure that the JPN and also the PPD are equipped enough to monitor the schools on the right track. The 9th shift is to partner with parents, community, and private sector at scale. So they want to equip every parent to support their child's learning through a parent engagement toolkit and online access to their child's in-school progress, meaning that this is not only the work for the schools and also the teachers, but also they must come from outside of school, which include the parents, the community, and also the private sector, to make sure that these children or these students are equipped enough. The 10th shift is to maximize student outcome for every ringgit, which will mean that they want to link every program to clear student outcomes and annually rationalize programs that have low impact. They need to make sure that which program is that needs to be discarded from school and what kind of program that needs to be added or improved in school. The last shift, the 11th one, is increased transparency for direct public accountability, which to conduct comprehensive stock stakes in 2015, 2020, and 2025. Okay, now we are going to look at the relation between trust in education in master plan and also the shift from the educational transformation. So for trust number 4, it is related to shift number 1. So trust number 4 is bridging the education gap between the students in rural areas and non-rural areas. So the first shift is to provide equal access to quality education of an international standard to make sure that every student must get equal opportunities in terms of education and everyone get the best education that the ministry provided. Okay, the second trust, developing human capital, is related to the shift number 5 and number 7. Shift number 5 is ensure high-performing school leaders in every school. And the 7th shift is leverage ICT to scale up quality learning across Malaysia. So these are to enforce the individual development. It must come first from the leader first. So in school, it will be the principal, and then from the principal, they need to provide the best education development, which is the ICT that can be used in PDPR, for example, nowadays, to make sure that these students get the quality learning from this current moment. The third trust, strengthening the national school, related to shifts number 6 and also shift number 8. Shift number 6, empower JPMs, PPDs, and schools to customize solution based on need. And shift number 8, transform ministry delivery capabilities and capacity. So in terms of curriculum in school, teachers and principal, it is more related to our ministry and also our JPNs in providing the suitable and the best program to enhance our student in school. Okay, the next trust number 1, which is the nation building. It is related to shift number 2 and shift number 3, which are ensure every child is proficient in Bahasa Malaysia and English language and is encouraged to learn an additional language, and also develop values-driven Malaysian. So here, if we want to produce the kind of student that love our country, that have our national identity, we must make sure that they are competent enough they are proficient enough with our language, Bahasa Malaysia, and also English language, and also additional language. And they need to be developed with moral values. The next trust number 5 and shift number 4, elevating the teacher profession, which is related to our teachers nowadays. With shift number 4, transform teaching into the profession of choice, which is the government wants to make sure that our teachers or IPGM graduates specifically to be at the same level as the international graduates. Trust number 6 is related to shift number 9, 10, and 11, which is looking at accelerating excellence of educational institutions, which includes the parents, the community, the private sector, and also the financial support, and also the public accountability must be must be sure that the schools, this educational system, are financially supported. So lastly, to conclude, there will be changes of our educational policy in Malaysia that happen time to time in accordance to advancement of technology or the adaptation of this 21st century. Therefore, in my opinion, the ministry, along with the teachers, the parents, the society, and also the student, must be ready and prepared to adapt with these changes. So I guess that's all from me. Thank you.